Welcome, everyone. Sorry for the bit of the delay. Thank you for taking the time today on a Friday afternoon to join the Washington, D.C. chapter of IAEE's first online Lunch and Learn. We are excited to have you with us and share some valuable information about the future of our industry. First and foremost, I would like to thank our IAEE DC chapter annual sponsor partners, ASP, Cvent, Hargrove, MDG, Shepherd AV, EPNAC, and MAR Association in Meeting Management. Without their partnership, we would not be able to produce our events. In response to the COVID-19 pandemic, IAEE's DC Community Outreach Committee encouraged our membership to donate to the Capital Area Food Bank, and the DC Chapter Board agreed to match up to $500 of all donations. Your generosity brought $690 of much-needed funds to our match, and our match equates to $1,190 sent directly to the Capital Area Food Bank. The Human Resource Alliance is also requesting assistance with fostering. For those with the ability and time to help, they can certainly use it. Please see our chapter website, www.iaeedc-chapter.com, for more information. Our DC chapter Chair's Choice Charity, say that 5 times, is the Michael J. Fox Foundation for Parkinson's Research. We've been collecting donations at our luncheons for the first few months of the year and so far collected $387. We continue to promote this cause for all DC chapter events for the remainder of the year. Please visit their website at www.michaeljfox.org for more information to donate. We do have a need for volunteers at the chapter level. For those of you who are members of the IAEE DC chapter, we need you. We are currently looking for committee members and those who would like to serve on the board of directors. If you are interested in being a part of this amazing group of industry leaders that I am lucky enough to work with and truly call my friends, please visit our chapter website to learn more and fill out the form online. If you're interested in supporting the chapter as a sponsor, either as an annual sponsor or an event sponsor, we would love to hear from you. Please visit our website or contact our chapter administrator at www.iaeedc-chapter.com for more information. With all that is going on in our industry today, it is more essential than ever to support each other. IAEE member resources are available to everyone, and we encourage you to utilize them and stay connected. This is also a great time to join the CEM community. Candidates must have 3 years of full-time experience. For those who are already a CEM certified, today you will receive CEU credits for this and every IAEE DC chapter program. I would now like to thank our sponsors for today's webinar, Greater Fort Lauderdale and Federal Conference. We truly cannot thank our partners enough for helping us make these events incredibly successful. All right, Phil, say hi.
Good afternoon, Paula. How are you?
I'm good. Phil Saims is the Vice President of Sales for Federal Conference and also serves as our Community Outreach Director for the IAEE DC Board of Directors. All right, Phil, let's talk about the rules and prizes today.
Do we have to have rules, or can we just give things away?
We have to have rules.
All right.
We have 3 audience engagement opportunities. We're going to ask a question, and the first correct response in the chat feature will win one of the 3 fantastic prizes. These prizes are, number 1, a round-trip airfare for 2 and a 2-night stay at the Seminole Hard Rock Hotel and Casino. Compliments of Fort Lauderdale. Travel must be booked in 2021, and some blackout dates will apply. Second prize is round-trip airfare for 2 and a 2-night stay at the Diplomat Beach Resort. Compliments of Fort Lauderdale. Travel must be booked in 2021, and some blackout dates apply. And our third prize is $25,000 World of Hyatt points, compliments of Hyatt National Sales. All right, Phil, you're up.
Wow, that's pretty exciting.
Yeah.
So before we get started, I want to share a couple of housekeeping rules, just like we would with any program, right? And the first is we are doing a virtual platform to allow what? Engagement. So what I'd like to ask you is across the top of your screen, there are a couple of tabs that I'd like to point out. The first is, and probably one of the more important ones, is our sponsors tab. So if you could take a few minutes, click on the tab and stop by one of the sponsor booths and say hello. The next one is engagement, and that's why we're doing a virtual platform today. And we want everyone to be able to engage, communicate, talk to each other, and visit each other. And then you'll go through the attendee area for that. The next is you'll be able to schedule meetings on the fly with one another, as well as the last thing is after this program is over, you'll have virtual chat rooms that you can actually go in and connect and chat about today's program. So with that said, I'm super excited about being here today in regards to the program and the information we have to provide. Our first question is, what are the dates and location of Expo 2020? The first person who answers online in the chat room will be the winner of our airfare round trip to Fort Lauderdale, thanks to Fort Lauderdale and Fred. So make sure you pay attention. Do we have a winner? Heather Brown is the winner of our first question. Congratulations. Super excited for you. It is IAEE Expo will be in Louisville, Kentucky, 8 to 10 December of 2020 this year. And moving right along, I'd like to talk briefly about our panel. We have a distinguished and amazing panel with us today that will provide some insight. And again, our focus today is really looking at, we're going through a tough time today, right? And we're going to get through this. We've gone through many cycles before, whether it's the dot-com bust and 9/11, the Great Recession and swine flu. We will get through today, and we're going to look towards the future. And part of our panel today, very excited to have David DuBois from IAEE National to be able to talk to us briefly about all the things that are going on at that level. Excuse me. As well as we have Kelsey Waite from STR, Smith Travel Research, will provide some information about different destinations throughout the country and where there may be opportunities if you need to relocate your program, some areas for you to take a look at. We're going to take that data and overlap that with our best friend, Kristi Waite, from the Knowland organization. And she's going to overlay the amount of meeting space of that destination. And we're going to wrap it up with my best friend, Amy Calvert, she's the CEO of the, I think I cut out. Hello. Sorry about that. So without any further ado, I'd like to introduce David to the screen, into the panel. Welcome, David.
Well, hello, Phil, and good day to everyone. Phil, I think you have the best background I've seen all week. You must live and work out of a museum.
You know, we try to make it comfortable, make sure it's presentable. So thank you, David. I appreciate that. I'm humbled.
Well, it's a pleasure for me to be with our good friends in the IAEE DC area chapter. I'm live here in Plano, Texas, USA. It was just north of Dallas. And I'm pleased to let you know that your staff has been virtual for 7+ weeks now. We've always had flex time and the ability to work from home. But now we're in a situation where all of us, 25 of us, work from home. We have weekly management meetings, and about every 10 days or so, we have an all-staff visit. We've even had a few happy hours where they've asked me to not talk about any business at all, Phil. So first thing is to let you know that not unlike many of you on this call participating in this program today, our staff has taken salary reductions to try to balance out the budget challenges that your own association has. As many of you, some of you are on furlough, some of you have lost your jobs. I wish you well, because we're going to do our best to get the recovery going and back into the kind of levels that we enjoyed last year, which were really record years for the exhibition industry in 2019. Kathy Breeden, who's our Executive Vice President and Chief Operating Officer for IAEE, sits on the board of the Events Industry Council, one of the board members for Amy Calvert's group that represents 33 organizations and well over 100,000 ladies and gentlemen across the globe. And Amy, congratulations on helping us make EIC even more global. That's a wonderful thing because our world is very global. I have the pleasure of sitting as a board member on U.S. Travel Association, as well as the Meetings Mean Business Coalition. Obviously, two very important entities that are helping us to move forward with our advocacy efforts, which I'm going to touch on. First of all, the U.S. Travel Association is predominantly our lobbying arm for the business events exhibition industry, all inclusive. If you look at our friends at PCMA and MPI and IAVM and HLA has their own lobbying team, but basically we don't have lobbyists. We don't have lobbying efforts like our friends at U.S. Travel has, American Society of Association Executives, and the American Hotel Lodging Association. Three different organizations that we rally with. We do call to actions, and we certainly participate in moving forward any legislation that's going to be helpful as we get through the COVID crisis. The CARE Act, obviously, all of you know about, was approved weeks ago. There's been two phases that have added funding. The Senate came back into session this week. The House will be back next week. And we have a Friday call every week with U.S. Travel Association, Roger Dow and Tori Barnes, who run their legislative efforts. And Roger's the CEO. And I'm pleased to tell you that there's great conversation now about including 501c6 organizations, which are predominantly the majority of DMOs, CVBs, or C6 organizations. Certainly all of you on this call who work in the DC, Maryland, Virginia area, most of you work for associations, are C6s. C6s were not included in the payroll protection plan program. And there's legislation now. If you're into going online, look up HR 6697, HR 6697, that we will be supporting, and you'll be seen as a member of IAEE and our community call to action later today or over the weekend to reach out to your congressmen and women to support 6697, which is a very aggressive effort in phase 4 to include C6s. Obviously, associations, most associations are C6s, and most associations have trade shows. So, Phil, I think it's going to be very helpful that we push this legislation across the line. It's got to go through the House first and get additional co-sponsors. Then it goes to the Senate, and then hopefully it goes to the president's desk so that he signs off on additional funding, and it'll help all of us in the exhibition industry that are C6s. And certainly there are many other legislative activities that we're supporting, not to minimize all our other efforts as well. Two more points I want to touch on are most of you have been made aware of GoLiveTogether.com. GoLiveTogether.com. It is a program that was initiated about a month ago now from our good friends at George P. Johnson and Freeman Companies. I believe there's over a couple thousand organizations that have signed on to support this, and individuals. It is really a portal for great work that's being done on behalf of advocacy, public relations, and guidelines that are going to be submitted for final review. And I'll talk about that in a moment. Also, you'll hear later on this program as well from maybe Calvert, who will talk about the great work being done by the Events Industry Council, who is really being the collaborator and kind of like the library of content. And Amy can explain that better. Great work being done in that area. And Phil, I'll leave everybody with one last program announcement. You may have seen on all of our social media outlets a collaboration between the International Association of Venue Management and GBAC. For those of you who don't know what GBAC is, 3 weeks ago, I didn't know what GBAC was and is. It is the Global Biorisk Advisory Council. So it's gbac.org. Please take a look. I'm not going to explain in detail for sake of time what they're all about, but it's CDC, WHO, scientists, disease infection professionals, ladies and gentlemen, who every single day will help continue to look at how we can move through this epidemic. And what I'm excited about is there's a certification program and a certificate for individuals program that you can read about. Go to IAEE.com. We have posted the press release on our website that talks about IAVM and GBAC program. And I'm pleased to let you know as I finish, Phil, that we are working very closely with our friends at CISO, as well as Amy at EIC and others, to put together guidelines for exhibition and business events. That is in draft form as we speak. We've had 8 or 10 ladies and gentlemen show organizers, as well as our staff, working aggressively on this. And within a couple of weeks, we will have guidelines out to our industry, and not only US, but globally, that'll help you all as you move into the late summer, early fall, hopefully very, very busy trade show industry timeframe, Phil. So I will stay on and be available for any questions afterwards, but please reach out to me or my staff if we can help you in any way via email or phone calls. Thank you very much and stay healthy.
Thanks, David. Absolutely. And thanks, David. I really appreciate it. I think what you said is critical, right? It's a matter of us coming together. It is a tough time. There are a lot of people that are furloughed and it's challenged, or they're unemployed completely. And hopefully today we come together, reach out to your representatives on the Hill to push this through, because working together, we will thrive and we will succeed. And I agree with you, later this fall and next winter and next year, we have great opportunities ahead of us. So again, thank you so much for today, David. Certainly appreciate it.
Pleasure.
Next, to join us with some pretty good information that should help our planners out there make some solid decisions looking forward into the future. I'd like to bring onto the stage Kelsey Waite from the Smith Travel Research and STR. Good afternoon.
Hi, Phil. Thanks so much for having me.
Absolutely. It's an honor and a pleasure, and very much looking forward to hearing what you have to say a little bit about. I think you're going to talk a little bit about sort of recoveries and kind of where we've been in the past, where we are today, and then I think more importantly, the future and the opportunities we have to work together and thrive and be successful. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah, exactly. So really seeing what the historical downturns looked like. And so that way we can kind of project what this one and when we can really recover and how
Excellent.
We can maybe help speed that along.
Excellent. Well, I'm going to turn it over to you, Kelsey. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Phil. Yeah, so really, where are we now? So we have actually been in the longest upturn for hotel performance that STR has ever seen. So STR actually looks at hotel performance across the globe, and we've been doing it for over 30 years. So our last big positive performance cycle was this last one. We had 115 months of positive growth for hotel rates, hotel demand, so how many people are staying in hotels. But you can see here, it really bottomed out in March with the COVID really hitting the US. We saw a negative 51.9% drop, which is the lowest or the biggest decline that STR has ever seen. Looking at this graph, you can see that 9/11 did have a bigger dip than 2008, 2009 with the Lehman Brothers collapse, but this basically dwarfs both of them. So let's dive a little bit deeper into what happened with 9/11 and with the Lehman Brothers in the next few slides. So we're going to start by looking at both of them. So here we can really see that in terms of rate, so ADR stands for average daily rate. So you'll see that in the next few slides of mine. But for that rate, so each individual room night, it took about 3 years after 9/11 to get back to the same rate that we saw in 2001. So the average room rate was $85 across the US, and it took until September of 2004 to see that $85 average rate again. And the same thing was with the housing crisis and Lehman Brothers. Their rate was $108 in September of 2008, but it actually took almost 5 full years to recover and get back to that same rate of $108. So what does that mean for right now? You guys are going to be getting some deals in the next few months. Not great for demand, not great for hotels, but on the meeting planner side, this is really a great time to negotiate for those lower rates, knowing that the rates will stay low for quite a while. So on the next slide, we kind of see where there's a difference between leisure and group demand differences. So leisure almost automatically drops the fastest. So we saw that after 9/11. We definitely saw that after the Lehman Brothers crisis, as we can see in this slide here. And we definitely saw that happening first for the COVID-19 crisis. The dark blue is going to be group demand, so what that year-over-year growth is. And you can see there were a couple of months in the first 6 to 7 months after the collapse that group demand was higher than leisure growth. And that's, again, normally because of some of those negotiated groups that were still coming in. And then everything really dropped off for group at that 7-month mark. But that's also when leisure started to come back. So a really interesting cycle there. When group was down the lowest is when leisure really started to turn around. So on the next slide, it's not the same story for rate. So you can see that the rates were still pretty high for leisure and transient bookings. So they're still spending more. Group is still getting a discount like you would hope to expect in most major markets. But after that 5 to 6 month mark line, we saw a transition where group rates were actually higher than transient and leisure room rates. And that's, again, those negotiated rates were done a year, 2 years, 6 months, however long before the downturn. And so hotels were still going with the negotiated rates, and meeting planners were kind of stuck with that. But after a few months, things really went back to how they should be, where group is getting a little bit of a break, again, with those dark lines near the end. And leisure started to pick up at the bottom there in December of 2009 is when leisure rates started to really overpass group rates. So what's happening now? When we look at today's slides, we are, again, bottoming out. March was the very beginning of the impact that we're going to see on hotels and rates. So this is just the group rate. We can see that the purple line is going to be the rate. So that has stayed pretty flat over the last few months, really 12 months, and then a little bit of a dip for March. But group demand completely just bottomed out in March. There's not a whole lot of group demand, as you guys know, which then will probably mean that rate will start to decline, but rate has not declined yet for group demand. As we saw in the previous slides from 2008, 2009, it probably won't start to significantly drop for a few more months. So looking at the next slide, this is really a good breakdown of what's happening right now. So this is data as of April 25th. So group business is down. So occupancy for group is down to 84%, not a surprise. That leisure transient occupancy is actually down more. So groups are still coming, but it also does compare against April of 2019 with the whole Easter shift. Maybe group wasn't as big in April of 2019 as we might see some declines for May. Either way, rates are down about 45% for both compared to April of 2019. So on the next slide, we can see that it's not all terrible. Business is starting to come back. So we did see our bottom out really in April. The week ending with April 11th, we had 7.2 million rooms sold that week for the entire US. When you look at March 7th with 23 million, and that was still a bit lower than what we normally see. So having 7 million, so just 1 million rooms a night being sold across the US, that is a pretty stark number, stands out quite a lot, but we are starting to tick back up. So the week of April 25th, we had 8.6 million rooms sold. And then last week, ending with May 2nd, we actually had 9.2 million rooms. So we're seeing about 500,000 room nights more being sold every week across the US. And hopefully that starts to continue as states open up and stay-at-home restrictions are lifted. Take that as good or bad, but it's happening. Not everyone is still doing that social distancing. So this is really proving that here too. So then on the next slide, we can see that of the top 25 markets, we really do have most of the markets falling within that 20 to 30% occupancy. So I know a lot of groups are not happening right now, but man, if they were, you guys would be getting some crazy deals, right? We actually only have 5 markets in our top 25 that have over 30% occupancy last week. So that was San Diego, New York City, Atlanta, LA, and Norfolk. All 5 of them have actually exceeded the 30% occupancy threshold for last week, which means business is coming back, maybe not for all of those markets. New York, we've been seeing just a lot of first responders staying in hotels, and that's really been why their number is so high, but it might not be the same story for the other 4 markets that are over 30%. So what comes next? So we know how 9/11 worked and kind of the comeback from that, how the Lehman Brothers, how long that downturn was, for almost 5 years. So now we really need to dig into what happens next. So most markets, I mean, no one had a meeting in February, March, April. It's not a lot going on May and June. We've been hearing about some returning July, August, and then the fall seems pretty solid still. However, with those meetings that were canceled, when you're trying to rebook within the same market, they may no longer have availability for dates later in the year. With social distancing, the space may not be sufficient anymore. So what are some other markets that you may be able to move your group business to in the fall and winter months coming up? So what I did was I looked at all 200 some STR markets to see who historically has had occupancy availability September, October through February. And I also made sure that they were markets that had enough space for large meetings in terms of room nights. So I looked at only markets that had over 8,500 hotel rooms available per night. So what I came up with was Baltimore, Charlotte, Columbus, Greensboro, and Winston-Salem is also included in the Greensboro market, Hartford, Connecticut, Houston, and Tulsa. So Houston has the most rooms at about 95,000 available every single night. And then Hartford has about 13,000, and everyone else falls somewhere between. So on the next slide is really showing where the seasonality lies. So again, I was looking for availability from October through February because I know that's when a lot of the groups might be moving to that were supposed to be happening in the spring and the fall. So as you can see here, nobody really has availability in October. So if I was a meeting planner trying to move my meeting, October is not when I would be doing it. Because again, these are the markets that had the most availability and they're still in the red for October. I don't have to tell you guys this, you're the ones in it every day. But October is really going to be the busiest month and the hardest to try to find new space in such a short amount of time. So on the next slide, we can look at what the actual occupancies are by month. So really those blue numbers are what you're going to be looking for. So for Tulsa, really any month is going to have the most availability in terms of actual room night space. Baltimore, December, January is going to be the best bet. Charlotte, really that January, December again. Greensboro has a little bit bigger of a winter season, so they have a lot more availability November through really March, which is surprising. March is also a tough month to get into. And then same with Hartford, November through really the early part of April has historically had a lot of occupancy availability. And then on the next slide, we can see kind of what some of those rate variances are. So between Q4, so October through December versus Q1, again, these are averages. So what we did was we looked at the last 3 years of what their rates were for Q4 and Q1 to see really what the differences are. So we looked at what the availability is, but then if you're also looking for a break in your rates, that might tie into whether I want to do it in November or if I want to do it in January, February. So Houston actually has one of the highest differences between the quarters. So Q4, their average has normally been $110 for group rates, whereas in Q1, so January through March, it's really because of March, they've had $121 group rates. Charlotte, they also have a little bit of a difference. So their Q4 again is going to be lower than Q1. One of the markets that kind of had the opposite was Baltimore. So it's more expensive in Baltimore in October through December than it would be for Q1, January through March. And again, this is looking at just those group rates. So not what their total average is, but what you guys would maybe be paying after you negotiate with them. So what else is going to happen? So if we take out these markets, what else can we expect for the future? So yeah, you can go ahead. Yeah, there we go. So not only those markets have availability, but these markets are going to have a lot more availability coming on in the next few years as well. Even with the new downturn, we're still expecting 6 to 12% increase in room availability. So just room supply in these markets. Nashville is growing like crazy. This is a 12% supply increase even after they've opened the JW and the Hyatts and all of the new properties that are in Nashville, still growing. Same with New York City, an 11% increase. So these are also markets to take a look at for the next 6 months to like 2 years. So really going to be expecting a lot of new hotel supply coming in. So this might be a great way to try to get great rates. Like, hey, I volunteer to be the first customer at your hotel. What can you do for me? So I would definitely take a look at these markets when you're trying to do your site selection in terms of what else is available. So finally, just wanted to end on what STR expects to happen for the future. So these are going to be the occupancy rates and the average daily rates for everyone combined for the US. So we're not expecting to get to 2019 occupancy or nightly rates for at least the next 18 months, if not farther. We're actually going to be putting out a new forecast later next week. So keep an eye out on str.com because we'll post it there for free. But we are expecting 2020 to end below 2013 levels in terms of rates for across the US as an average. And occupancy is going to be basically at an all-time low for a year-end number at less than 40%. Again, this is including group and transient and business and airline room nights. We're really going to have a tough year and a half, but again, this will not last forever. That's just something that I want to keep reiterating. And with you guys knowing what to expect for average rates, then you guys can get back out there faster, have some better tools for negotiating, and kind of knowing where you guys stand. So I will just leave it at that. But again, I'll be available too for questions at the end if we have time. So thank you so much, Phil.
Absolutely. I really appreciate it, Kelsey. And again, I think the takeaways there are definitely some good information that's actionable for planners to be able to make some decisions as they kind of move forward and again, look towards the future. So amazing information, Kelsey. Thank you so much for that. And for those of you who are on and paying attention, guess what time it is? It's question 2. So our next question, again, thanks to Visit Fort Lauderdale, we are giving away round-trip airfare for 2. To earn your CEM credential, how many modules must be successfully completed? The first person who responds is our winner. I'm wondering who's going to get this one. I know someone that's very up on this. Everyone should know this by now. Come on. Do we have a winner? And our winner is Casey McNeil. Congratulations. Super excited for you. The answer is 9 modules are required to earn your CEM credential. So congratulations to you. Enjoy that trip to Fort Lauderdale and the amazing beaches they have and all the exciting activities that are down in Fort Lauderdale. Again, thanks, Fred, for those donations and supporting this effort. As we move forward, we talked a little bit about destinations and the guest rooms and kind of average rates. That's great information. But for a planner, the other part of that is the meeting space. And I think that where Kristi's going to come in and be able to help us from Knowland is give us a little bit of a snapshot on the areas and destinations that they read in to give you an idea as to how much meeting space is available and some other suggestions as you move forward in negotiating with your tips. So I'd like to welcome to the stage Kristi.
Hi.
Good afternoon, Kristi.
How are you? I'm good. It's Friday.
It is Friday. Well, welcome. And again, I think the combination of these two organizations coming together and sharing this information is so powerful as we look forward and move forward together and thrive. So what I'd like to do is, if I could, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to you, Kristi, because I know you have a lot of amazing information as well as some pretty good tips moving forward to working with hotels. So again, thanks so much, Kristi.
My pleasure. So as we wait for the slides to come up, today I'm actually going to take a slightly different tack than Kelsey did, because that was great information about the guest rooms. But realistically, for the next 9 months or so, we're not going to really encounter any hotels that don't have guest room availability. So I'm going to look at historically what that looks like from a meeting room perspective. Now, I've been around in the industry for 30 plus years. This is actually my 5th economic downturn. And shockingly, they all recover roughly the same, slightly differently depending on how big it is. But since this is really the biggest one we've ever encountered, it's going to recover differently. It's the same, but it's going to recover just longer. So if we move to the next slide, I'm going to kind of walk through what the changes that we typically see after a recession. So as we go through it, go ahead and click that for me. So the first thing that we typically see is a shift in location. So meetings pull away from those larger destinations in favor of smaller regional meetings. This shift reflects a change. Typically, it's due to impact of cost for the companies or organizations. They want to get those costs down just a little bit because maybe they don't have as much money coming into their coffers, but they realize they still need to do those meetings. So they move away from bringing everybody to a single destination to potentially doing 3 or 4 smaller regional destinations, meetings in drive market destinations. So that's the first one. And then that leads us to the reflection of that first one is the shift in numbers, because it's those shift to drive markets. Companies had more meetings, surprisingly. Even coming in the midst of a recession and coming out of it, we actually saw the number of meetings go up in these smaller markets, because again, rather than having that one large meeting, they were having 3 or 4 meetings across multiple destinations. So after downturns, we typically see an increase in meetings, but they're small meetings and there are more of them. And then that leads us to that last shift, which follows the first 2, and it's the shift in size. So since they're doing away with the larger meetings, they need less meeting space. So to kind of illustrate this, we looked specifically at 3 markets, and we looked at 3 types of markets: tertiary, secondary, and primary. So if we go ahead to the next slide, we're actually going to look at our tertiary market, and we specifically looked at Winston-Salem for this one. So this is looking at the number of events that occurred from 2008 to 2011. So it takes us from the beginning of the recession to really when the full recovery had hit. And you can actually see in that 2011, that's that yellow line, that was the year that we started seeing the most number of events. And it really began to hit the slide there. The one thing that I do want to point out on this is that despite the fact that we were in the worst economic downturn ever, we did see the seasonality of the meetings stay remarkably similar. And I always like to do that because markets tend to stay the same year over year. They may grow, they may decline, but the ebbs and flows of them stay remarkably same. So to Kelsey's point earlier, if you can kind of understand what the cyclical pattern of a market is, it'll also help you understand what months you might want to place place meetings into, where you're going to get better availability and potentially you're going to get better rates because you're in one of their downtimes. You go into most markets, setting the pandemic aside, you go into most markets, whether they're major markets or smaller markets, in October, it's usually one of their busiest months of the year, and the rates are naturally going to go up. So getting to understand the cyclical nature of markets can also help your client organizations understand where they might want to plan things. But now that we've looked at this sheer volume of numbers of meetings, what happens to the size? And this is where it gets interesting. And we saw this almost in every market that we looked at. So if we go to our next slide, now we're actually looking at this. Nope, back up one more for me. You went a little too far. There we go. Now we're actually looking at the average square footage that was used. Looking at that same time frame, so looking at 2008 to 2011, so that from the decline up to the recovery, and we see that the average size of these meetings dropped dramatically, and that reflects the pattern of more meetings but smaller in size. Finally, for this market, we looked at this pattern, but across the full 12-year period from 2008 to 2020, because as Kelsey very wisely mentioned, we're coming out of the largest growth period we've ever seen in our industry. So I wanted to look at that full period. So if we go ahead and we're looking at the average, one slide for me. So now we're looking at the average number of meetings that we were seeing relative to the average size of the square footage. So hit the forward button for me twice here. There we go. So the average number of meetings actually peaked in 2012, but our size was relatively small. But what we saw as we went through the period is the number of meetings begin to come down, but the meetings start to get larger. So by 2019 and even into early 2020, they were having fewer meetings, but they were having much larger meetings. Now, what makes this interesting is, so we don't typically have an occupancy metric like Smith Travel does for hotel guest rooms from meeting space, but we can look at it from an optimization perspective. So in 2011, the market was averaging 20% of its available meeting space on a daily basis, versus in 2019 and 2020, where it's actually having larger meetings, it was only averaging daily usage of 7.9% of its space on a daily basis. So that means even though they were having these bigger meetings, they weren't optimizing and utilizing their space as frequently on days. So there was still availability even when we were at the height of this growth for meeting space. So chances are where that's going to tweak now that we're in the midst of this pandemic is you're going to see that number sort of converse of it. You're going to see a little bit less availability from a meeting room perspective because there are going to be those social distancing metrics in play. And you're actually probably going to see the room night usage go down just a little bit. So this is going to be one of those instances where you're probably going to want to book a little bit earlier to make sure that you can get the necessary meeting space that you need. Moving to the next market, we're going to take it up a notch and go to a secondary market. Now, I selected Hartford for this one. Now, this market performs slightly differently than in the meeting count. It stays roughly the same across all 4 years. You do see that one peak in 2008, but that was right before the recession really took hold. So from a number of meetings, the market was relatively unimpacted. And that kind of makes sense based upon where Hartford is. It's in the midst of two very large destinations, so it's very easy for groups to pull out of Boston or pull out of New York and just meet somewhere in the middle. So the number of meetings didn't necessarily surprise me. And I was actually kind of happy to see that those stay relatively the same. But when we move forward a slide and look at it from the utilization of meeting space, We actually see that exact same trend. You actually see in 2009, the amount of space used goes up just a little bit, but in the subsequent years, it actually comes down again. So again, we're seeing more meetings, but smaller meeting space. And then as we take that broader step out and look at it from a 30,000 foot view, going to our next slide, you see that exact same thing. You're actually seeing the meeting stay relatively flat. It starts to decline towards the end of the period, but look at starting in 2017 when those numbers go up dramatically from the size of the meetings. So this is a market that you probably would have had a little bit more trouble getting into the space because they actually utilize their space better. Over this whole time frame, they average 36.6% of their space being used on a daily basis. And over the past 3 years, they've actually averaged 41.8% of the space. So this is one of those markets that you're probably maybe have a little bit harder time getting meeting space in. I think you're going to be easy to get in from a guest room perspective, but it may be a little bit harder because they do optimize their space, and we're doing a very good job of that. Moving to our last destination, and this is where we step into a primary market. And as we get into that, this is really a primary market. It's probably the largest single market in the world, looking into New York City. So, but the same thing impacted here. 2008, smallest number of meetings on average by month. And by 2011, we're actually seeing sheer number of meetings grow exponentially. So it exhibits, even though it's the largest market in the world, it exhibits the exact same pattern that we saw with the smaller markets. Moving forward a slide as we look at that square footage that's functionally used, in that first flush of recovery near the back end of 2019, we see meeting size grow. 2010 declined a little bit from that peak, but by 2011, the numbers declined even more. And this is typically exhibited because companies based in the city, they still held meetings. They may have also been doing regional meetings elsewhere, but they tended to be local meetings with fewer out-of-town attendees that's leading to those smaller meeting sizes. When we actually span this one out to the full 12-year period, going forward a slide, what we'll see is that meeting count. Go ahead, one slide. Yeah. Meeting counts peak and plateaus in 2011, and then 2017, they start to decline. But you're actually, again, seeing that meeting size go up from that point. So all of these markets exhibit the exact same behavior in that period after a recovery where the meeting numbers go up, but the actual size of those meetings go down. And I believe that's exactly how that we're going to recover when we're able to start meeting again. So if we move forward a slide and start to look at what that recovery will look like, go ahead one more for me. Awesome. So I'm going to go back to exactly where I began.
Hey, good afternoon. I think we have a small technical difficulty. So I want to thank Kristi for her amazing information. And we have one final and most important person who I've known for many, many years. I'd like to welcome to the stage Amy Calvert with the Events Industry Council. Oh, do we have Kristi back?
I think you might be trying to get Kristi back, but hi, everyone.
I felt so bad, Amy. I cut out right when I was talking about the Events Industry Council earlier. So welcome. Good to see you.
Nice to see you. You look very handsome. And I do, as David said, love your setting. It's much more sophisticated than mine.
I will let you have the stage. Thanks so much, Amy. We'll be back in a second with you. You're bringing Kristi back, or am I good? I think you're on.
Oh, okay. Well, so everyone, thank you. I really applaud you for making time, for being a part of this conversation today, and continuing to reach out and take advantage of the great networking and the education that the IAEE Washington, D.C. chapter makes available to you. I would think, one of the biggest learnings that we've all had is, how quickly we've adapted and how important this is. And I know one of the things that Phil and I wanted to make sure that, I bring to life and part of my closing comments, and I promise to be brief, is that, when I think about what's happened to us as an industry, one of the most inspiring things is how quickly we've rallied together to collaborate and to think about during this period, and then to use our collective knowledge, wisdom, experience to think about how we all work together to spur on our recovery. And I think that's going to be, obviously, as we've heard today, it'll be a phased recovery. But I think one of the most important things, and when I took part in Global Meetings Industry Day, one of the things that I was most impressed with is how inspired this workforce is, despite the setbacks, despite how many people are really being so greatly impacted right now. I think we have a group of people that really want to come together and think about how do we, through the learnings that we've had personally and professionally, use that to help make our industry stronger. How do we use this moment in time to help people better understand the value that we bring to the communities that we serve? So while we know this is really hard, and our thoughts, of course, are first and foremost always with those first responders and those people most deeply impacted, I've been personally really proud of the way everybody has come together. So I think I have one slide, and that's really just to share with you all. David alluded to it in the beginning. One of the things that we do at the Events Industry Council is we provide a unified voice on behalf of all of our fantastic members. At the end of the day, EIC is a global federation of industry organizations. We represent 33 member organizations, but we represent over 120,000 individuals globally. And, as David said, we are a global community. I think this pandemic reminds us, first and foremost, about our common humanity. And I think it also reminds us that, we have a much bigger and broader story to tell. So it's essential that we come together during this time period. There's a lot of people doing fantastic work right now. David mentioned, the group that he's working with, the GBAC certification. There are great things happening within the airlines, within the audiovisual space, obviously hotels, lots of really important information coming out of WHO and CDC. And so what this group looks to do is really curate and assemble in a really meaningful way, because I think we're all feeling it. We're seeing so much information out there, but how do we all make sense of it? The Apex Business Recovery Task Force will look to assemble accepted practices and curate by sector the things that we need to know, right? And we want to focus in a priority order. So there's information that we need right now as we start to think about the beginnings of the first phase of recovery and trying to better understand, with the social distancing guidelines and the health and safety practices that, the venues and the hotels and all the other elements of the supply chain are going to implement in order to create a safe environment. And then we'll start to think as a group about, some of the broader pieces of how this global pandemic has really called us to think maybe a little bit differently about the adaptations that we need in our industry. We've been talking for a really long time about what is our commitment to social impact? What is our commitment to sustainability? How do we, like I said earlier, how do we lift up our workforce right now and support them as best we can? And so this group is going to try to consider, deeply how we offer our leadership voice through all of this. And I encourage you, there's going to be opportunities to take part in conversations and to share information, but I will stay in touch with all of you as we look to bring a unified message and a resource to the market. So I know we don't have a lot of time. I would just say again, we all are in a position right now to mentor, to lead, and to be inspired about what is on the horizon and take care of one another. So thanks for being here today. Thanks for inviting me. Be well. Happy early Mother's Day to all the moms out there. And if I can help you with anything, feel free to reach out to me.
Thank you, Amy. Great presentation, great information, such a great resource for our community. And we really appreciate all the time and effort that you put into that, because that really does help us to know what's happening out there. So thank you.
You're welcome.
Have a great weekend. Happy Mother's Day.
Yeah, you too. Bye, everybody. Be well.
Thank you. So now it's time for another prize. This is compliments of the Hyatt National Sales. It's 25,000 World of Hyatt points. So question number 3, what is one of the 3 nonprofits that were highlighted in the session? It's a tough one. So I'm going to give you a hint. They were mentioned during the first part of the webinar when I was speaking. Have a winner. Have a winner. I believe we have a winner. I believe, let me see. Yep, it's Claudia Maurer. Yay, congratulations. You get 25,000 World of Hyatt points, and hope you use it somewhere fun. Okay, the answers were Michael J. Fox Foundation for Parkinson's Research, Capital Area Food Bank, and the Humane Rescue Alliance. All right, so just to finish up, we're right on time. Please note these resources and reminders. You've got IAEE's Exhibitions Day on June 3rd. It's free to register. Go to www.iaee.com to register, and it's all online, all virtual, but still the same impact. So please do participate if you can, get involved. We also want to remind you of the resources with IAEE.com, EIC.org, and CEIR.org. We appreciate all of our panel today. Kristi, Kelsey, Phil, Amy, David, of course. We appreciate all that you guys offer, and we hope everybody has a safe, healthy, happy weekend. Happy Mother's Day to all the moms. We hope to see you guys at our next event, and thank you for your time. Have a good weekend.
Bye, guys.
Bye, everybody. Be well.
Bye.